Okay, deep divers, let's jump straight in. Today, we are tackling something I think almost everyone runs into, especially when speaking English or really any language that's not your first.
Hmm.
It's that moment the conversation just stalls. You know that
Oh,
feeling.
yeah.
You're
Exactly.
talking, it seems okay, and then boom, silence. And you're scrambling thinking, what do I say now? Or maybe you give a super short answer and, well, the other person is left hanging too.
It's so common. And it feels awkward, doesn't it? Frustrating even, like
Yeah.
hitting a wall.
Exactly, hitting a wall.
And I think that wall feeling, it gets magnified when you're not in your native language, right? There's that extra mental effort, that pressure maybe to sound fluent. And when the flow breaks, it can feel like a bigger deal than it really is.
Yeah, like you failed somehow.
Right. But it's usually just a small mechanical thing, and absolutely, it's something everyone can get better at with, some practical tricks.
Right. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We've got some great source material here that really breaks this down. It offers some really simple, uh, actionable strategies just to keep that conversation ball rolling.
Yeah, simple stuff that works.
We're going to look at asking questions that actually invite a proper answer, not just, a yes or no.
Hmm.
How to make your own answers a bit richer, fuller, using those little kind of glue words, the ones that make native speakers sound so natural.
Fillers, yeah, but used well.
Right. And even, okay, how do you change the subject when you need to without it being totally weird and abrupt?
And importantly, we'll spend a good chunk of time looking at the cultural side of things in English conversation.
Hmm.
Because it's not just words.
That's a really key point.
Things like, the role of small talk, why people share little stories, the importance of showing you're listening. These aren't just grammar rules. They're fundamental social tools in places like the US, the UK, Australia. Understanding them makes a huge difference in feeling confident.
Okay, so get ready. By the end of this deep dive, hopefully, those awkward pauses won't seem quite so scary. You'll have a kind of toolkit ready to use.
Yeah, make you feel more prepared.
More confident and just able to, jump in and participate more fully in English chats. Our mission today.
Unlock the flow.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So thinking about that conversation breakdown, where does it usually start? What's like the first domino to fall, according to our sources?
Well, the source material points a big finger right at the start.
Yeah.
The questions people ask. The number one mistake identified is asking questions that basically only need a yes or a no to answer them.
Ah, the closed questions.
Exactly. The source actually calls them dead-end questions, which I think is a perfect description.
Dead-end questions. Yeah, I can picture those. Like, did you have a nice weekend? Or maybe, are you enjoying this coffee?
Precisely.
Oh.
I mean, someone can politely answer yes or no, and they technically answered you fully.
Uh-huh.
But then what happens?
Sorry.
Right. The conversation suddenly relies completely on the person who asked the question to immediately pull another question out of thin air. Because that yes or no gave them absolutely nothing to build on.
Zero information to react to.
It just kills the momentum
Yeah.
instantly.
It really does feel like hitting that brick wall you mentioned. Okay, so how do we avoid building that wall in the first place? What's the core technique the source suggests?
It's actually pretty straightforward. Shift away from those yes-no question structures. Instead, lean heavily on questions that start with words like what, how, or why.
What, how, why?
But yet, because these words, just by their nature, they demand more detail. They're asking for information or a process or a reason, not just a confirmation.
Right, not just an on-off switch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source gives a really clear example comparing ways to ask about music. So if you ask, do you like music?
The answer's probably just yes. Conversation potentially over. That's the dead end.
That's the dead end. But if instead you ask, what kind of music do you like? Well, now what?
Now they have to give you something more. They can't just say yes to that.
Exactly. They have to elaborate. They might say, oh, I listen to a lot of rock music, actually, especially classic rock. Queen is probably my all-time favorite band.
Okay, see, now that gives you something. Suddenly, from just that one answer, you've got options. You could ask about rock, classic rock, Queen.
Right. You could ask about their favorite Queen song, or if they've seen them live, or what other classic rock bands they like. The key thing is, the answer itself gave you the material for your next question.
The information was baked in.
Yes. The information they gave you classic rock, Queen, becomes the springboard. And the source shows how you can then follow up that answer. So they say, Queen is my favorite band, and your next question could easily be, oh, really? Why do you like Queen so much?
And the why question takes it even deeper.
Yeah.
Now you're getting into their personal connection, maybe memories, what they appreciate about the sound. It's gone from a potential one-word answer to exploring taste and feeling.
All sparked by starting with what instead of do you. It's a huge shift.
Yeah.
You're basically opening a door for them to walk through, instead of just asking if the door exists.
That's a great way to put it.
Using what, how, or why, you're prompting their brain to access and share, richer stuff. Descriptions, reasons, stories, opinions. And that's so much better for conversation than just a yes or no. Think about asking, how did you get interested in photography? Versus, are you interested in photography?
Big difference. How asks for a story.
It asks for a process, yeah.
Yeah.
Effort, maybe passion. It's just inherently more engaging.
So it's not just about getting more words, it's about getting words that actually mean something, that reveal something, and give you those threads to follow.
Okay, so step one seems clear. Ask questions that actually invite a proper answer. Use what, how, why.
Absolutely. That puts the fuel in the conversational engine right from the start. Okay, brilliant. So you've done your job, asked a great what question. The other person gives you a fantastic detailed answer, but the conversation can still fizzle out if your reply, when it's your turn to respond, is too brief.
Right, that's the next hurdle the source points out. You can be the one answering, get a perfect open-ended question, but if you just give a one or two-word answer back, well, you're kind of handing them back an empty plate.
Yeah, leaving them with nothing to chew on.
Exactly. The person who asked is suddenly back to square one, thinking, okay, now what? The source uses the example of someone asking you, do you like traveling?
And the conversation killer answer would be just yes, or maybe sometimes.
Right, just yes. That's it. The asker is left thinking, okay, they like traveling. Where have they been? Do they travel often? Where do I even begin? There's no hook.
So what's the fix here? The source's advice seems simple but really powerful. What's the technique for giving better, more helpful answers?
The core rule is this. When you answer a question, try your best to always add at least one extra piece of information, or maybe even include a follow-up question yourself, directed back at them.
Okay, add info or ask back.
Yeah. Let's look at that traveling example again. Instead of just yes, the source suggests a much better answer like, yes, I absolutely love traveling. Actually, last year I went to Thailand, and it was just amazing. Have you ever been there?
Okay, let's unpack that response because it does a lot of work, doesn't it?
It really does. So first, it answers the question directly. Yes, I love traveling. Check. But then, crucially, it immediately adds specific detail. Last year, I went to Thailand, and it was amazing.
Right. Thailand is specific. They might know it, have opinions, want to go. And amazing gives an emotional flavor.
Exactly. It provides hooks. The other person can immediately think, oh, Thailand, what was amazing about it? Or, wow, Thailand, I've always wanted to go. Or, oh, I went there a few years ago. You've given them specific things to latch onto.
And then, the genius part, you don't just leave it there. You actively toss the conversational ball back with a question. Have you ever been there?
Precisely. So you've done two key things. Given them information they can react to, and given them a direct, easy question to answer. You've made it incredibly simple for them to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, they can choose. React to Thailand, ask about your trip, or answer your question about their own experience. Compared to the single yes, the options just exploded.
It's a totally different dynamic. It's like you're not just hitting the ping pong ball back over the net. You're hitting it back with a nice, easy arc, making it simple for them to return it.
Yeah, your answer isn't the end point. It's setting up the next point.
Exactly. You're taking a bit of responsibility for keeping the flow going. Now, this doesn't mean you have to give a 5-minute monologue every time someone asks you a question. The source isn't saying that.
Right, just a little extra.
Just adding one specific detail, maybe, or asking that follow-up question. Think about practicing adding because and then giving one simple reason. Or last weekend, I mentioned one quick thing you did. It's about getting into the habit of thinking, okay, I answered. What's one more small thing I can add?
It probably feels a bit conscious at first, adding that extra bit, but the source suggests it becomes more automatic with practice, and the payoff avoiding that awful silence seems totally worth it.
Absolutely. It makes the whole exchange feel much more like a real conversation, less like an interrogation.
Okay, good. So better questions, richer answers with follow-ups. Now let's get into something that really makes speakers sound, well, natural and fluent. It's those little words, those phrases that aren't strictly needed for grammar, but they just smooth everything out. Our source calls them filler phrases.
Yeah, and it's important to see these not as mistakes, but as tools. these fillers, or maybe call them conversational lubricants. They're essential for sounding natural. Native speakers use them constantly, often without even thinking about it.
Right. They fill those tiny gaps while you think, or they soften things. The source points out that just a blunt yes or no is actually pretty rare in real flowing speech.
Much rarer than learners often think. So
Yeah.
instead of just yes, what do people actually say?
Yeah, give us some examples from the source.
Well, very commonly you'll hear yeah, which is just a more casual form, or to show stronger agreement, things like yeah, definitely, or absolutely, or for sure, sometimes right, or exactly are used not just for facts, but just to show I'm with you, keep going.
Okay. And what about for no? Because just saying no can sometimes feel a bit sharp, can't it?
It really can. It can sound quite abrupt. So the source suggests softer alternatives like not really. That's a very common one.
Not really. Yeah, that's much gentler.
And often, like we were just saying about answers, people pair it with something else to soften it further or keep the door open. Like, not really, but I'd love to try it sometime. Or maybe, no, I don't think so, which is softer than a flat no.
I like that. Not really, but it connects back to adding information. It acknowledges the no, but keeps things positive or future-oriented. Okay, what about when you genuinely just don't have the answer? I don't know. Can also feel a bit abrupt.
It can sometimes sound a bit dismissive. Yeah, even if that's not the intention at all. So the source gives a great alternative phrase that does a few things at once. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it.
I used that one. That's a good question. It buys you a second, acknowledges the question was thoughtful.
Exactly. It shows you're engaging with the question. Good question. It explains why you don't have an instant answer, haven't really thought about it, and it just feels much more collaborative than a shutdown, I don't know.
Right. It keeps the conversation warm, even if you can't provide the specific info.
The source also mentions some other really common general fillers that you hear all the time.
Yeah.
Things like, well, actually, like, and so.
Well, actually is interesting. It often signals a slight correction or maybe adding a nuance, doesn't it? Like, did you enjoy the movie? Well, actually, the first half is great, but the ending.
Yes. It prepares the listener that what's coming might be slightly different than expected. It's everywhere. Sometimes it's literally checking if they know what you mean. We went to that cafe, the one on Elm Street. Other times it's just a rhythm thing, a way to pause naturally.
Like a little verbal comma.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And like is often used, especially in, say, American English, to introduce an example or an approximation or even reported speech. He was like, no way. Or it took like 5 hours.
And so often acts as the transition, right? Like, so what did you end up doing? Or so the main point is.
Exactly. It can signal a summary, a result, or a shift in topic. The main point the source makes about all these fillers is
they make you sound more natural, smoother.
much more fluid, yeah. Less robotic, less like you're mentally translating every single word. They fill those tiny natural pauses while your brain catches up, preventing those awkward silences and making the whole thing feel more effortless.
Like adding oil to the conversational gear.
And that's a good analogy. They give you that microsecond to think while still making a sound that shows you're engaged and about to continue.
So the takeaway isn't to eliminate them, but maybe to notice them and try using a few.
Definitely. Don't overuse them to the point of distraction, obviously.
Yeah.
But mastering a few common ones like, well, actually, or even just softening yes to yeah, can make a big difference in sounding more comfortable and fluent.
Okay, this is great. Better questions, fuller answers, smoother flow with fillers. But, sometimes the topic just naturally runs out of steam. Or maybe you suddenly remember something important you wanted to ask about, totally unrelated.
Right. And you need to change the subject. The goal, as the source highlights, is to do it smoothly, not just slam on the brakes and swerve into a new topic.
Yeah, avoid that conversational whiplash. So the source gives us some specific transition phrases as tools for this. Let's look at those. First up, that reminds me. How does that work?
That reminds me is perfect when something someone just said, maybe even a small detail or a keyword, sparks a connection in your mind to a new topic you want to bring up. You use the phrase to explicitly signal that connection.
So you're showing the link.
Exactly. Even if the link is a bit tenuous, saying that reminds me makes it feel logical to the listener. The source gives an example. Maybe you're talking about packing for trips or different airlines, and you say, oh, that reminds me. Have you ever been to Japan?
Okay. So the general theme of travel was the trigger, and that reminds me, bridges you to the specific new topic of Japan. It feels connected, not totally random.
Right. It shows your train of thought. Another phrase, maybe for a slightly closer connection, is speaking of that.
Okay, speaking of that, how is that one used? Is it different from that reminds me?
It often feels a bit more directly linked. You usually use speaking of that to pick up on the main theme or a specific word that was just mentioned and use it as a launch pad for a related point or question.
Yeah.
If the whole conversation has been about, say, different holiday destinations, you could use the source as example. Speaking of travel, do you have a dream destination?
Okay, so travel was the explicit topic, and you're using, speaking of travel, to zoom in on a specific aspect, dream destinations. It stays within the same broad subject area, but shifts the focus.
Exactly. You're leveraging the current topic to pivot slightly. Now, the third phrase the source gives is probably the most useful for when you need to introduce something quite new, maybe even unrelated. Oh, by the way.
Oh, by the way. Yeah, that definitely feels like a softener for changing gears.
It really is. It signals, okay, what I'm about to say is a bit of a side note or something I just remembered I wanted to mention. It's a gentle way to introduce something that might not have a clear logical link to what you were just talking about.
Like the source example. Oh, by the way, did you see the news today?
Right. Unless you were just discussing the news, that, oh, by the way, acknowledges your shifting focus. It's like saying, hold that thought. I just wanted to quickly mention this. It feels more polite than just jumping subjects.
So these phrases, that reminds me, speaking of that, oh, by the way, they're like verbal turn signals for the conversation.
That's a great way to think of it. They guide the listener, letting them know you're changing direction, making the whole journey smoother and less confusing. Trying to consciously use one of these in your next chat is a really good practical exercise.
Okay, so we've got a toolkit of mechanical techniques. Asking, answering, using fillers, transitioning. But the source makes this really vital point that just knowing the techniques isn't the whole story. To really keep conversations flowing naturally in English, you also have to understand the cultural backdrop.
This is huge, absolutely huge, because conversation isn't just universal. What's considered polite or interesting or even normal to talk about can vary massively between cultures. And the source really emphasizes that in many English-speaking cultures like the US, UK, Canada, Australia, a massive everyday part of interacting is something learners sometimes dismiss. Small talk.
Ah, yes, small talk. The stuff that can feel, well, small, maybe even pointless sometimes. But the source argues it's actually a huge part of daily interactions.
It really is the social lubricant. Small talk usually isn't about sharing deep, vital information. Its purpose is connection. It's about showing friendliness, building a little bit of rapport, making people feel comfortable with each other.
So it's like a social handshake.
Kind of. It's a low-pressure way to interact, to maintain social ties, whether it's just for a moment or as a lead-in to a bigger conversation. It smooths over introductions, fills potentially awkward silences, and just generally keeps the social wheels turning.
And where does this happen? Is it just for parties or networking events? The source says it's much broader.
Oh, much broader. You encounter it everywhere, according to the source. At work with colleagues, in a cafe, talking to the barista, waiting in line at a shop, maybe even in an elevator for a moment, at the gym. It's all those brief, polite exchanges.
Like chatting about the weather while you wait for your coffee.
Exactly that. Or asking a coworker about their weekend by the water cooler. Those little moments.
And crucially, what are the safe topics for this kind of talk? Because you can't just launch into anything, right?
Definitely not. The source stresses the importance of sticking to neutral, light, universally relatable subjects. The absolute classics in the US and UK. The weather. Always safe.
Can't go wrong talking about the rain or the heat wave.
Never. Other safe bets are things like popular TV shows or movies, general plans for the upcoming weekend, maybe sports, if you have a reason to think the other person might be interested. Sometimes very general, non-controversial local events can work too.
So things like, wow, it's finally stopped raining, hasn't it? Or did you catch that game last night? Or got any fun plans for the weekend? Those kinds of easy, open questions.
Perfect examples. They're easy to answer, don't require any deep personal knowledge, and they invite a simple, friendly reply. Yeah, hoping the sun stays out. Or, no, missed the game, who won? Or, not much planned, just relaxing. How about you? They serve their function. A brief, positive connection.
Okay, but this is critical. The source gives a very clear warning about topics to absolutely avoid during small talk.
Vital information. In many English-speaking cultures, certain topics are considered far too personal or too likely to cause discomfort or disagreement to bring up in casual chat, especially with people you don't know well. The source specifically flags, money, religion, and politics.
The big three. Yeah. You generally wouldn't ask someone you just met how much they earn or what their religious beliefs are or who they voted for.
Exactly. These topics are often deeply personal, potentially sensitive, and can be very divisive. Discussing them usually requires a level of trust and established relationship that just isn't there in a typical small talk situation. Sticking to the light, general topics keeps the interaction comfortable, friendly, and conflict-free.
Makes sense. Keep it light. Keep it friendly. Okay, so small talk is for those brief connections. What about making longer conversations more engaging? The source highlights another key cultural aspect.
Yes, storytelling. In many Western cultures, there's a real appreciation for sharing personal experiences, little anecdotes. It's not just about relaying facts, it's about connecting on a human level, making points more relatable, more memorable, often more entertaining.
So instead of just stating something, you kind of wrap a little story around it.
That's exactly it. Turning your experiences into mini narratives within the conversation. The source uses that common question again, how was your weekend? We already know the minimal answer, it was good, doesn't really help the conversation.
Right, that's the dead-end answer. What's the storytelling version the source suggests?
It's much richer. Instead of just, it was good, you might say something like, oh, it was actually pretty eventful, thanks. On Saturday, my partner and I went hiking up near Miller's Peak, and we stumbled across this amazing hidden waterfall. We had no idea it was there. Totally gorgeous. That was the highlight. Then Sunday I decided to try making sourdough bread from scratch for the first time.
Oh, I sense where this might be going.
Yeah, let's just say it didn't quite rise to the occasion. It was more like a brick. Ha-ha. Total baking fail. How about you? Did you get up to anything interesting?
Wow, okay, that is worlds apart from it was good. Let's break down why that works so much better.
Well, first, it's packed with specific, concrete details. The waterfall, Miller's Peak, the sourdough disaster. These aren't abstract, they paint a picture.
And those specifics give the listener multiple things they can easily grab onto and respond to, right?
Exactly. As the source points out, the listener now has clear entry points. They could ask about the hike. A hidden waterfall, that sounds incredible. Was it hard to get to? Or they could relate to the baking fail. Oh no, sourdough's tricky. I had a similar disaster trying to make macarons once.
So your story becomes a catalyst for their contribution, whether it's a question about your experience or sharing a related one of their own.
Precisely. It turns a simple Q&A into more of a shared experience. You're not just reporting facts, you're offering little slices of life that are designed to connect and provide those hooks for the other person. It just makes the whole conversation feel more dynamic, more personal, and frankly, more fun.
It really does. It feels like you're actually getting to know the person a bit. Practice turning simple answers into mini stories. Instead of work was busy, maybe work was crazy busy. I had 3 back-to-back calls and then spilled coffee all over my keyboard.
Exactly. Add that little bit of narrative color.
Okay, so we've got small talk for establishing connection, storytelling for deepening it. What's the final cultural piece the source emphasizes? This one is about what you do while the other person is talking.
Yes, and it's crucial. Active listening. Now, this can be tricky because what counts as good listening varies culturally. In some cultures, showing respect might mean listening very quietly, almost silently.
Right, minimal interruption.
But in many English-speaking contexts, that quietness can sometimes be misinterpreted. It might accidentally come across as disinterest, or like you're not following, or even disagreeing.
So even if you're totally focused, just being silent might send the wrong signal.
It potentially can, yes. The speaker might feel like they're talking into a vacuum because they're not getting the expected feedback signals. Active listening is about providing those signals, both verbal and nonverbal, to show you're tuned in, understanding, and engaged.
Okay, so what are those signals? Let's start with the verbal ones, those little noises or short words people use while someone else is talking.
Yeah, the source lists several common ones. You'll hear these constantly in native speakers' conversations. Simple acknowledgments like, uh-huh, yeah, right, okay, gotcha, I see. These basically mean, I hear you, keep going.
Just little, I'm still here signals.
Exactly. And then there are slightly more expressive ones that show reaction. Oh, really? Shows interest or mild surprise. Wow. Stronger surprise or admiration?
No way.
Yeah, often expresses disbelief or big surprise. That's interesting. That sounds great. Or maybe, oh no, if you're telling a story with a problem.
So these little interjections show you're not just hearing the words, but actually processing and reacting to the content.
Precisely. They provide immediate feedback to the speaker, making them feel heard and encouraging them to continue. They don't interrupt the flow, they support it. The source suggests practicing these. Maybe deliberately try using, "Oh, really?" or "That's interesting," next time someone tells you something.
Okay, those are the verbal cues. But active listening isn't just sounds, right? Body language plays a big part too.
A huge part. The source emphasizes nonverbal cues as well. Classic examples include nodding your head occasionally as someone speaks that signals agreement or understanding. Maintaining good eye contact is also key, not staring intensely, but regularly meeting their gaze shows you're focused on them.
And maybe leaning in slightly?
Yes, slightly leaning forward can also signal attentiveness and interest. These physical actions work together with the verbal cues. Wow. To create a complete picture of engagement.
So active listening is this whole package deal. The little verbal sounds, the short reaction phrases, the nodding, the eye contact, the posture, all working together.
Exactly. It's a continuous, often subtle stream of feedback, telling the speaker, yes, I'm with you, I'm following, keep going, this is interesting. Practicing these, even starting with just nodding and throwing in an uh-huh, makes you appear more engaged, makes the other person feel more comfortable, actually encourages them to talk more.
Which gives you more to respond to. It's a positive feedback loop.
It really is. It helps everything else we've talked about work better.
Wow, okay. This has been incredibly detailed. We've gone from the mechanics of what, how, why questions and adding detail to answers, through using fillers and transition phrases, right into the cultural importance of small talk, storytelling, and active listening. It feels like a comprehensive toolkit.
It covers a lot of ground, definitely.
And the good news is, our source material wraps this up nicely by boiling it down into a really clear, actionable challenge. Something you, the listener, can actually try out.
Yeah, it's broken down into 3 very doable steps you could try, maybe even today or in your very next English conversation.
Okay, step 1. Choose a simple, safe conversation topic. Something like we discussed music, travel, hobbies, maybe weekend plans. Pick one that feels comfortable for you.
Step 2. Then think about asking open-ended questions about that topic. Really consciously try to use what, how, or why. Maybe even prep 1 or 2 in your head beforehand. So instead of, do you like movies?
Yeah.
Think, what kind of movies do you like? Or how do you usually choose what movie to watch?
Good one. Okay, and step 3.
Step 3 is about trying to use just 1 or 2 of those other techniques. Maybe focus on using a filler phrase, swap a plain yes for yeah, definitely. Or maybe concentrate on active listening. Make sure you nod and say or a few times while the other person is talking. Or perhaps add 1 extra detail to your own answer. Just pick 1 small thing to focus on.
Just one thing that feels manageable.
Exactly. These steps are designed to be small bites. Don't feel overwhelmed like you have to suddenly do everything perfectly. Pick 1 technique, maybe asking better questions, and really focus on that for a bit. The next time, maybe focus on adding detail to your answers. Build it up gradually.
That makes sense. It's about conscious practice, little by little. And as you head out to try these things, the source offers a really important final thought, a kind of mindset shift.
Yeah, it's a really powerful reminder. When it comes to learning and using English for conversation, remember, it's about connection, not perfection.
Connection, not perfection. I really like that. It just lowers the stakes, doesn't it? Because you will make mistakes. Everyone does, even native speakers. You'll forget a word or use a phrase a bit awkwardly, or your grammar won't be flawless. That's totally okay. The real goal isn't to sound like a textbook.
No, the goal is to connect with another person.
Yeah.
To understand them, to be understood by them, to share a thought, an idea, maybe a laugh.
Focus on that connection. Focus on being genuinely interested in the other person, on sharing a bit of yourself. The fluency, the naturalness, all that stuff, it comes with time and practice. Don't let the fear of making a mistake stop you from actually talking and connecting with people.
Just keep talking. Keep practicing these little techniques, even just 1 at a time.
Yeah.
And try to find the enjoyment in it, the fun in actually using English to interact.
Experiment. Play with it. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, here's that final thought to chew on, building on everything we've discussed. We've explored these typical English conversational patterns, the small talk, the storytelling, the active listening cues. Now, take a moment to think about how your own native language and culture handle conversation. How do people typically interact where you grew up? Comparing that to what we've talked about today, what aspect of the English approach maybe surprised you the most or felt the most different from what's natural for you?
That self-reflection can be really insightful.
Definitely. And then thinking about those differences and all the specific techniques we covered, asking open questions, adding detail, using fillers, transitions, active listening, Which one specific strategy feels like the very first thing you want to consciously try out in your next English conversation? What's your step one?
What will you focus on first?
Keep those questions in mind. Most importantly, keep those conversations flowing.
Absolutely. Until the next deep dive.